Aleppo University. I've got BA in English Literature in 2006, and then later on I traveled to Saudi Arabia, which is also in the Middle East, next to United Arab Emirates. So I traveled in 2007. I worked as a teacher of English for primary, intermediate, upper intermediate schools, private and also international schools. In 2012, I got my CELTA, that is Certificate of English Language Teaching to Adults, which is a kind of a practical course to teaching English. And then later on, I traveled to Sunderland in the UK in the northeast. And I got my MA in TESOL in 2013, to be honest. I graduated in 2013 and I became an EAP teacher, that is English for academic purposes. So in here, teaching English in general, but okay, it is focused more on the academic English. So I became an EAP teacher teaching under and postgraduate students in the in-sessional and pre-sessional courses. I have been working since 2013. I got a master in business management in 2018. And I opened my own language center in 2019, but because of COVID, I couldn't go ahead with this language center. So sometimes, you know, when a door is closed, another door is open. So I started working for Hwacho University online, that is in here. Hwacho University, as you can see in this area. I wonder if you can see the cursor. Okay, in this area, this is Hong Kong in here. There is Xiamen. Okay, and Chuanzhou. So I worked in there as a module leader for many modules, research methods, academic writing, English business writing, and the public speaking. And then finished in 2023. They asked me to join them. Unfortunately, I couldn't because I was, working at Sunderland University. I became a fellow of the higher education in the UK in 2021, and I enjoy being at the university doing the EAP. And I would say today I would like to share some of the knowledge I have with you. So hopefully it will be interesting, productive, and a fruitful session for all of you. So what are we going to do basically today? Today we are going to look at what academic writing is, okay? And then later on we're going to look at the structure in academic papers, what structures we have. And then later on we are going to delve and go deeper and investigate the features of academic writing. And this include today, this is what I can talk about today. This would include, I know it's limited to these because academic writing is a very, a big thing to talk about. And today we are covering it into just hours. But hopefully we'll be successful to cover most of the points. So we're going to talk about the sentence structure, hedging tentative language, what we mean by that, paraphrasing, and citing sources, and also the paragraph structure, and then building into discourse markers and how our knowledge in discourse markers will help us in being critical in academic writing. Now, so we are going to cover all of these points, and then, as I said, in between, we are going to have a break, okay, for 5 to 10 minutes. And as we go with the content of our session today, we are going to apply the knowledge that we have, the theoretical knowledge, into actual papers sent by Olye Messi. With the thanks. So we are going to apply this theoretical knowledge into, practice by analyzing the academic writing in these texts. Okay? Now, if you have any question, I understand that we have now around 152 attendees, okay, spectacular attendees in these sessions. So it won't be possible to answer all your questions. So what I would say, if you have any question, you can put them on the chat, and then later on, I will do my best to answer them at the end or probably at a later time. Okay, right. So let's go ahead. So what is academic writing? And I would kindly ask you, like, what makes a piece of writing academic? So when we look at any text, how can we differentiate whether it is academic writing or it is not? So this question is directed to all of you, and I would like here, if you can, participate by answering the question and put it on the chat. I think, would that be possible, Olumisi? Hopefully it is. Okay, so I can see in here the chat. So yes, I can see that. Yeah, you can have access to that chat. So again, in here, my question to you, what is academic writing? Okay, what does it mean to you? And what makes a piece of writing academic? When you look at any piece of writing, probably looking at a newspaper, okay, or probably just looking at a post in Facebook, okay? So how would you distinguish it, whether it is academic or not academic? So could you please put that on the chat? I'm going to give you just 1 minute to do that. So the question again, according to you, what do you think academic writing is? I've got here one answer. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so it's a kind of formal writing, okay, needed for the purpose of teaching and spreading knowledge. Yes, based on the content. Okay, according to you, what do you think academic writing is? Well, yeah, that is Olimesi writing that question. All right. Next, a formal research writing, right? And that states academic writing is a piece of, and okay, right. Is a formal writing for school or research purposes. Evidence relevance, yes, of course. Okay, supported by evidence is very important here. Yeah, and also schools, used in schools, college, and research, right? In here you are talking where it is used, but looking for what is academic writing. It's a formal, okay, many of you, evidence-based, yes, based on evidence, presenting research results, subjective. All right, it's not just imaginative or subjective. All right, we're going to talk about, okay, this issue is very important. Academic writing is evidence-based. Yep, evidence-based formal writing for research. Yeah, thank you very much for all your input. Now, looking at academic writing, we can see some of these features. Okay, it has that formal tone. We try to be like more formal rather than using a slang language, the everyday spoken English. And in here we need to use what we call like not everyday spoken vocabulary. We have the clear structure. Okay, it is based on a clear structure rather than being complex, difficult to be understood, thesis-driven, have a clear idea of each paragraph, the critical analysis, being critical, not taking things for granted. So looking at one side of the argument, it won't be like academic, rather than it is a subjective. And in here, you are biased rather than being objective and being a critical, looking at things from a different perspective, and what applies in one context may not apply in a different context. Next, the use of evidence, as you already mentioned, that it is evidence-based, based on research, okay, and data and facts, the clarity. Now in here, I understand many of you would think about like academic writing, it should be like a complex kind of writing, rather than it is clear and simple to understand and logical. So we tend to be clear when we write academically. Also accurate grammatically. Now in here, we're talking about grammar, and the grammar, we're talking about rules. in here, we need to abide with the sentence structure, with the words that we are using, the adjectives, adverbs, nouns, etc. And also with the punctuations. Without punctuations, sometimes it makes the text difficult to read and understand, and it makes it like confusing. Also, we have the formal citation, of course, based on the evidence. The citation, it means that we need to refer, we need to acknowledge where we got this piece of information. We need to say who said that. So we will let other people, when they read our work, they go back and check where we got our sources from and whether they are reliable, authentic or not. Sometimes we have some sources that are not reliable. So in this case, your argument will be weak. And this makes the difference between a good academic writing and a weak one. Also, we talked about the impersonality. I'm talking here about the being subjective or objective. So in here, we try as much as we can to distance ourselves from being biased and having biased ideas. And as I said, being critical, we try to be, more objective, looking at things from different perspectives. So we try to distance ourselves from being subjectives and also having our own personal views. So as you can see in here, all of these features combined together, form the academic writing, and they are like integral parts of academic writing. Today, we are going to delve and we are going to look and have a closer look into what academic writing is, probably looking at most of these features. Now, first, let's start by building the structure. Now, the structure of academic papers, either it will be like in a form of an essay or probably in a form of a piece of research. So, for example, you're writing an assignment to your, university, I mean, in your program. So you're writing an essay of probably like 3,000 word or 4,000 word, whatever. At the same time, okay, on a format of a piece of research. Now, each one of them has a different structure. So in here, for example, in the essay, we tend to have like the introduction, and then later on in here, as you can see, the parts of the essay, the parts or the points that we are talking about in the essay, and then later on in here, we have the conclusion. So in here, for example, if we are talking about social media and the effects, or let's say the positive or negative effects, or probably talking about the problems generated from excessive use of social media. Now in here, talking about these, let's say, disadvantages, and then let's say that your essay is also about disadvantages and solutions. So in this case, you need to divide your work, talking first about the disadvantages, the demerits, and then later on the third paragraph and fourth paragraph in here, third paragraph, fourth paragraph, probably you'll be talking about the solutions. This depends on the requirements of your essay and what is required from you. So as you can see, it should be organized in a way that is easy to understand. So make it clear. So first you start with the introduction, and then later on the points that you are going to discuss in here. And then later on, as you can see in here, the conclusion. In the conclusion, you need to summarize everything you mentioned already in your essay. Now, however, when we move to research, as we are going to see today, we are going to see a different kind of structure. First, you're going to have what we call the introduction, and then later on the literature review, and then you have the methodology. The methodology, when we say methodology, it is the method. Method, it is the way. The way of what? The way to answer the research question. So basically, in the introduction, you have a research question. You have a question that you're looking for an answer to it. And then later on, in the literature review, You need to talk about what other people do to answer the research question or a similar question to you. So that is in the literature review. And then later on, you need to put the methodology section, which is the method, the way that you are going to use to answer the research question. And then later on, you have in here to present the data and to discuss the data. You need to discuss your data at the same time on the light of literature. So you need to compare and contrast your data with the literature. And then finally in here, you have the conclusion. The conclusion, you need to summarize all your research. You need to talk about your research question. You need to talk about the most significant findings you have. And then you need to have a set of recommendations based on the findings that you have, and also recommendations for further research for other researchers to complete or to go ahead and answer other research questions. So these kind of recommendations, you recommend other researchers to answer some of the questions that you recommend. So as you can see in here, these kinds of the basic academic I would say papers, the structure of academic papers. The essay, it has a shape, and a research, it has also a different shape, format. So again, the essay, an introduction, and then the points that you are going to discuss in your essay, whether you are going to describe, whether you are going to argue, or whether you are going to outline some of the solutions. And then later on, you have in here the conclusion. As for the research, you have the introduction, then you have the literature review, and then later on the methodology. What method are you going to use to answer the research question? And then the results and discussion. And finally, there is the conclusion. Now, in here, looking at this research, you can say that, components of the research, it is an essay. So you need to have an essay for the introduction. You need to have an essay for the literature review. You need to have, or you need to write an essay for the methodology, an essay for the conclusion, for the discussion, and then another essay for the conclusion. So we can say like the essay is part of the components of the research. Now in here, for the essay, usually we give like 10% of the introduction and conclusion of the whole of the word count. So for example, if you have to write an essay of 2,000 words, okay, an essay of 2,000 words, so you need to allocate 10% for the introduction and 10% for the conclusion, and then 80% for the requirements of the essay. Okay, this is the general, I would say, allocation of the word count. As for the research, in here it will be slightly different, where we have again in here like 10% for the research. So for example, if you're writing 10,000 words, so that will be like 10% for the research introduction and 10% for the conclusion, and then later on you need to have around like 3,000 words for the literature review, and then around like 2,000 words for the methodology, and the rest for the discussion, for presenting data and the discussion. But again in here, as you can see, 10% for the introduction and 10% for the conclusion, and then later on around like 2,500 or probably 3,000 words for the for the literature review, 2,000 words for the methodology, and then the rest for the discussion. So that is the basic structure of academic papers. So now what we're going now to do, we are going to apply this knowledge, okay, on the papers I have. So first of all, I would go to this one. Just a moment. Okay. So in here, I wonder if you can see the Word document. Can you see the Word document? Perfect. Yes. Thank you for your interaction. This makes it much better. Right. So as you can see in here, the title, okay, shows the prevalence of electronic gambling and its correlation with academic performance and a mental health among male undergraduates in Redeemers University, EDE, etc. So as you can see in here, now looking at the structure, it is a very organized structure. First, we start by having the introduction, okay? And then later on in chapter 2, we have the literature review. And as you can see in here, I can consider the literature review as an essay, okay? Each chapter, we can consider it as an essay because it deals with a certain and specific, area. So in here, this is the literature review and the components of the literature review. And then later on, we have the methodology, how the question is answered, how the research question is answered. So you can see here with me the research design, setting, target population, etc. All of this about the methodology. And then number 4, you would notice with me data analysis, results, and interpretation. And then number 5, there is the conclusion, the discussion of the findings with the conclusion. This should be like the conclusion, right? And then finally in here, the set of references with the appendices, right? Now that is in here, the structure. So let's look here, for example, at, the structure of the literature review. Again, in here, just to grasp the title. So the title is talking about electronic gambling. What else? And the relationship with academic performance. So in here, we are talking about gambling and academic performance and mental health. Okay. Now, as you can see in here, we are talking about a connection between the gambling, academic performance, mental health among male undergraduates. So as you can see in here, this defines the context. So we are talking about, so number 1 in here, we have male undergraduates and in this area, okay, in this university. So I'm talking about this particular context. So now we understand this is the topic and this is the structure of academic paper. Now, in here, if we move on and check the structure of the literature review. And as I told you, we're going to deal with the literature review as an essay. And as you can see in here, it is divided to an introduction, then conceptual review, and then later on empirical review, and then the theoretical framework. Okay, so all of this about this essay that we call the literature review essay. Right. Come on. Right in here. Okay. Now, moving on. Now, academic writing. In academic writing, what we need to do, we need to avoid the use of slang and colloquialism. So, as I said, try to avoid the everyday spoken English. Now, in here, before going ahead, I will tell you something very, very important. Now, when we talk about academic writing, we need, as you can see in here, we need to abide with the rules. Now, when it comes to rules, there are restrictions. And when you are restricted, okay, then in this case, you need to know when exactly, okay, when exactly you have to use academic writing. Now, academic writing and grammar do not start at the beginning of the process of writing. Keep this at the first stage. It is the stage where you have ideas, you put them on paper. Okay, all the ideas, you put them on paper. You don't need rules. You don't need restrictions. Leave this to a later stage. Why? Because you will be restricted if you do that. So in the first stage, go and search for information. Start writing ideas, start writing your sentences, but now it's not time for the academic writing. Leave academic writing till a later stage. Don't restrict yourself with academic writing in the first stage of writing. Leave it at a later one, which is the redrafting, the editing, and proofreading. Okay, so as you can see in here, when you do that at a later stage, okay, you need now to avoid using the slang. Now, in the second stage of writing, you need to look at your writing, and now in here, you need now to apply your knowledge. You need to look at the vocabulary that you have used and replace them with more academic vocabulary. So in here, avoid the slang and colloquialism. Use a standard English rather than conversational language. So for example, kids these days have a lot on their plate. Now, let's say that you have written this sentence at the first stage of writing. Now, moving to the second stage of writing, which is the proofreading and editing. Now, in this case, we start to replace the vocabulary. And instead of saying kids, you can say young people, okay? And instead of saying these days, you can say today, you can say current times, okay? And then instead of saying have a lot on their plate, you can say face numerous challenges. So as you can see in here, in the second stage, now you start applying the rules, okay? So you change the slang language that you produced in the first stage, and now you replace it with more academic one. Now, in this case, I would say now you can consult a dictionary, you can consult AI, you can consult, Google, tools, etc., to change the slang language into academic one. Now, then in here, maintain objectivity. In academic writing, we need to be objective rather than subjective. So, for example, the use of third-person perspective. Now, write in the third person, okay? So, in this case, avoid using personal pronouns like I or we. So, in here, you try to avoid using the first person rather than using the third person. Now in here, probably using it and they. I think this study shows, now as you can see in here, I think. Now it's not about me, what I think. It's about the object, about the idea. It's about what argument I'm talking about. It's about probably the facts. Okay, then in this case, I would change it probably to I would hide this. Yes, this study demonstrates. So as you can see in here, the focus is on the study rather than on me, the researcher. So as you can see, I maintain objectivity. Also, in academic writing, we avoid contractions. So as you can see in here, the use of do not instead of using don't, cannot, and instead of using can't, or they aren't, they went, etc. So in here, informal, it doesn't provide enough evidence. Now, as I told you, in the first stage, no problem. Write whatever you want. However, in the second stage of writing, now I need to look at these things, look at these rules in order to maintain academic writing. So as you can see here, it doesn't provide, I need to change it to, it does not provide sufficient evidence. Right. Here, as you can see, the use of vocabulary, and instead of using enough, I use the word sufficient. So enough, I would say it is more spoken, English, rather than we use the word sufficient. It's more academic. So as you can see here, it does not provide. Now, moving to choosing appropriate vocabulary, like in the previous example, enough and sufficient. Now in here, elevated word choice, select words that are sophisticated but appropriate for your audience. So in here, using, I would say, uncommon vocabulary, not the everyday spoken English. So instead of saying a lot of, probably you can say a significant amount, a considerable amount of something. So as I told you, in the first stage of writing, no problem at all. However, when we move to the second stage, now we try to apply rules. And now I need to think of, all right, I use in here a lot of, I need to change it, okay? To change it to a significant amount, a considerable amount, okay, many, massive, etc. Right. Also, using the formal transitions. Now in here, we need, and I'm going to explain more about this in the second hour. Okay, the use of formal transitions, because they tell us the direction where the essay is going or where the argument is going. So for example, in here, phrases for formal writing utilizes phrases like in addition, moreover, furthermore, therefore, consequently, to connect ideas smoothly. So for example, if you are talking about the problems of excessive use of social media. Now in here, let's say that you are talking about 5 problems. So you start by saying that you're talking about the problems, and you start saying, using transition words like first, second, the third problem, moving to the fourth one, and finally. So as you can see in here, you are telling the reader that you're going to talk about, you know, probably 5 points, 6 points, etc. Or if you have more ideas, or as we are going to see in a bit, you're having an idea and then you have, let's say, a counter argument, okay? Something that you are going to criticize. So we're going to see that in the second hour. So for example, in here, on top of that, it's clear. So probably you can say more formal one. Furthermore, it is evident that. Okay, so furthermore, what's more, you can say in addition, additionally, etc. All of these to add more ideas. Also, in academic writing, we tend to avoid being emotional. So avoid using emotional language in order not to make things subjective, okay? Like you are targeting people, okay? You know, you are, you're talking about sentiments and feelings rather than talking about the idea, the issue itself, the argument, okay, or probably fact. So objective language, refrain from using overly emotional or exaggerated expressions. So for example, sometimes it was shocking to see, it was surprising to know, okay. I was extremely happy. Okay, this research is extremely lovely. Okay, so we tend not to use this language rather than using probably you know, more formal ones. So, for example, you can say it was unexpected to observe. Okay, unexpected. It is interesting. Another interesting piece of research. So you say interesting piece of research. Okay, instead of saying a wonderful piece of research. Okay, so you see, or like, for example, spectacular. Okay, study. In a spectacular study, all right, try to avoid using this emotional language rather than using more objective language. In an interesting study, okay, it was found, etc. Okay, right. Now, also, I would say part of the academic writing is the use of adjectives and adverbs. Now, in here, we need to use adjectives and adverbs in our writing. And as I said, this is at a later stage. So let's say you write your essay in the first draft, and now I need to look at my writing again, and I need to see what adjectives and what adverbs I have to use. Okay, so the need for using adjectives and adverbs simply because now when we talk about a verb, okay, and then talking about an adverb, so an adverb gives me more information about the verb. So for example, if I'm talking about the profits of iPhone, okay, mobile phones, okay, over the last year. So if I say, for example, it's not a fact, okay, it's just an example in here. So when I say the profits of iPhone fell, okay, last year. Now in here, if I change it, and I would say that profits of iPhone fell dramatically or fell slightly, or fell gradually, or fell sharply last year. So you notice in here, I'm adding more information about the falling of the prices, okay, or the falling of the profits, I would say. So in here, I would say the profits of iPhone fell dramatically last year. So you notice the word dramatically, it gives me more information about the verb. Now, the same thing happens when we have adjectives, okay? For example, if I say a sharp increase, or when I say a gradual increase, or when I say a slight increase. So you notice the difference. We have the word increase, which is the noun, and we have the adjectives. Sharp increase, or a slight increase, or a gradual increase. So as you can see in here, the use of adjectives and adverbs, very important in academic writing, because it makes our writing and sometimes our speaking, okay, more accurate and precise. And in academic writing, we need to be accurate and precise, okay? Right. Now, let's move on and check in here practice time, and then later on, we're going to have a break. So it's a practice time in here. Make the following sentences formal as the following example. Look at here, informal. What we found in our tests matches what others thought might happen. Now, looking at this, as you can see, what we found, the experimental results align with. So instead of saying matches, we're saying align with. Theoretical predictions proposed by previous researchers. And instead of saying other thought might happen, we say proposed by previous researchers. Let's look at here at this example. Informal. The main idea of this paper is supported by the numbers we give later on. So in this case, I can change it to a different way. The thesis of this paper is reinforced by the data presented in subsequent sections. So as you can see in here, instead of saying we, the personal, okay, pronoun, give later on, as you can see, it's a kind of everyday spoken English. So we can say subsequent section. Again in here, informal one. Looking at the whole history, really, so you see the word really, it's a kind of emotional. Really helped us figure out what happened. Look at here, the word figure out. Now, this is, we call them two verb words. Okay, sorry, two words verb. So in here I have figure, and then we have the word out. So two word verbs. Now, instead of saying figure out, probably I can say the word discover. Okay, instead, to figure out, I can say to discover. And the same thing when we say like to find out. Now, let's look at here. A comprehensive analysis of historical context was integral to understanding the events that occurred. So helped us figure out, again, as you can see in here, help us to understanding the events that occurred. So instead of saying, for example, happened, I can say the word occur. And the same thing in here, instead of saying the whole, I can say the word comprehensive. Another one in here, the numbers we got are good starting point for more research in this area. The data collected, and instead of saying, you see here the word got. By the way, I noticed many students write the word got. Okay, so again in here, it's not academic, so it's better to use a different vocabulary. Probably you can see in here the word collected, because this is what the meaning is about. Or you can say the data obtained. Okay, so the data collected in this area serves as a cornerstone for further investigation. Instead of saying more research, further investigations in this area, I change it to in this field. Of course, this is just an example. Of course, you can use different vocabulary and you make it, more formal in a different way, which is totally fine. As I told you, let's say that in your first stage of writing, you wrote they came up with really careful guesses to check how things are connected. Then in this case, you can say, instead of saying guesses, the research hypotheses were meticulously formulated to test specific relationships between variables, and so on. So in here, what people said in the survey gave us big ideas that go beyond just this one project. The survey responses yielded valuable insights that transcend the boundaries of this particular study. So as I said, in the first stage, there's no problem of using whatever language you have. However, in the second stage, now you need to look at the vocabulary, look at the sentence structure, and look at the punctuation. And then now it is time to apply all of this to make your writing academic. Right. So, okay, in the first session, we talked about the academic writing, what makes academic writing academic. And we talked about parts, or let's say the structure, or sorry, the features of academic writing, some of the features. Now, moving on to more features. Now, in here, as you can see, we need to employ passive voice appropriately. Now, in here, the passive voice, using passive voice where necessary to maintain an impersonal tone, but do not overuse it. Now, in here, for example, when we talk about passive, now, what do we mean by passive and what do we mean by active? Now, in English sentences, we have active sentences and we have passive English sentences. Like what? When we say active, it means the focus is on the action, or the focus is on the doer of the action. That is active. Now, in the passive, we try to hide, okay, away the doer of the action. We focus on the object. We focus on the topic. So, for example, we conducted the experiment. Now, as you can see in here, we is the subject, okay? And conducted is the action. And then later on, experiment is the object. This is the thing we worked on. It's the experiment. Now, in academic writing, we tend to use the passive form. So how? This is by saying, for example, the experiment was conducted. Okay. Now, in here, as you can see, the word we, it's hidden. It's not in there anymore. The focus is on the experiment. The focus is on the object itself rather than the subject. So as you can see in here, we use the experiment was conducted. Okay. So the focus is on the experiment and is on the action itself. Okay. Rather than the subject. Okay. Now, also, we need to use a wide range of sentence structures. Now, in academic writing, we need to have variety in sentence length and type. Now, we need to use a mix of simple, compound, and complex sentences to convey ideas more effectively. And once more again, I stress on the fact that this will be in the second stage of writing, not the first one. In the first one, just write, okay? You have your ideas on paper. Write all your ideas on paper. Now, then later on, at the next stage, when you're doing the drafting, second draft or third draft, now you need to think of applying the academic writing rules. So in here, you need to have the simple, compound, and complex sentence structure. So, for example, looking at here, a study was done last year. It showed interesting results. So I can say a study which was conducted last year revealed intriguing results. So as you can see in here, I would say, instead of saying informal, I think this is a typo. These are two sentences. As you can see in here, the first sentence, a study was done last year. And then the second sentence, it showed interesting results. So I can change it into a study which was conducted last year revealed intriguing results. Now, I would like to quickly look at the kinds of sentences structure with you and examine the simple, compound, and complex, because we are going to build on that knowledge and learn how to make a paraphrased work. Right. So in here, in simple sentence, so we do have like simple, compound, complex, as I said. Now, in the simple sentence, as you can see in here, sentences that contain one independent clause and no dependent clauses. So in here, independent clause is a group of words that contain subject and a verb, and that can stand alone as a complete thought. I have a complete thought. I have a complete idea. So look at here with me. The study focuses on climate change. I have subject, I have a verb, and then later on, rest of the sentence. And the same thing in here. Researchers collected data. So researchers subject, collected is a verb, and then the rest of the sentence. And the same thing in here. Statistics and graphs illustrate. I have a subject, I have another subject, and then a verb. Now moving to compound sentence structure. Now in here, I have two sentences compound or combined with a conjunction. Look at here with me. Look at the conjunction. The conjunction is and. Now in here, I have researchers gathered, researchers subject, gathered is a verb, and then in here, they is a subject, and analyzed is a verb, and then connected with and, a conjunction. Look at here, at this sentence now, or I would say two sentences, but of course, this sentence is a compound sentence. I have two sentences connected together with a conjunction. Look at here. Many students struggle with academic writing, yet they improve. Now in here, the word yet, it shows that the writer is being critical, is being, trying to show a different perspective. Now in here, when I read it, okay, I know that the writer is trying to be critical and criticizing a previous idea. So as you can see here, in this sentence, students struggle. And then the use of yet, it changed, the meaning of the sentence. So in here, when we say students struggle, it implies something negative. However, looking at the word yet, they improve, it implies something positive. So in here, at the beginning of the sentence, it implies something negative, but with the use of yet, which is a conjunction, now it implies something positive. Now I know that the writer in here is being critical by the use of conjunction like yet or but. Look at here. The theory was well received by some scholars, but it faced criticism. So again in here, well received, it implies something positive. But when I use but, now the second sentence should be a kind of like a negative, implies something negative. It faced criticism from some practitioners. Now in here, as you can see, when we use or, it shows like more than one option. Now in all of these, okay, clauses, as you can see in here, we have one independent clause and we have another independent clause connected together with a conjunction. All conjunctions are in one word, that is fanboys. F for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S for so. I'm writing them in here in the chat. So these are all the conjunctions. Okay? Fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Now moving to complex sentence structure. As you can see in here, complex sentence structures, we have what we call dependent clause and independent clause. So for example, if I say this sentence to you, although the weather outside is cold, and I stop. It doesn't make sense. This clause does not make sense, and we call it dependent clause because it cannot stand on its own. Although the weather is cold, all right, so what? It's not complete. It's incomplete sentence. It doesn't make sense. It cannot stay on its own. So in here, in this sentence, although the study aimed to assess the impact of social media on mental health, the results revealed unexpected patterns in user behavior. Now, as you can see in here, in the other sentences, I use, for example, the word while, or I can use if clause, which is a complex sentence structure. And then later on in here, I can use the if clause at the beginning or at the second part of the sentence. Look at here. The experiment could potentially fail if key variables are not controlled during the testing phase. Now, looking at this, as you can see with me, this is a complex sentence structure because I have dependent and independent clause. Now, in academic writing, we need to use wide range of sentence structure. Now, we need to apply this knowledge, okay, in our in our example. So let's look at here. I'm going to go to the literature review in here. Let's apply the knowledge we had. This is the introduction, but as I told you, I'm going to go to the literature review. So in here, this is the literature review. This chapter includes a discussion of the conceptual review, theoretical framework, and empirical review, which together comprise. So this kind of sentence is, I would say, complex, and I will put it in blue color. Now, moving here, globally, the prevalence of gambling among university students has become a growing area of concern, with studies indicating that all of this is a complex sentence structure. Now, in a cross-sectional study conducted in the data, found that, again in here, as you can see, a complex sentence structure. Similarly, in Australia, it was observed a significant proportion of male undergraduate engaged in frequent gambling, which they attributed, again in here, it is a complex sentence structure. Right. So looking at this sentence, studies in Europe and Asia have also shown that also it is a complex, because as you can see, the word that, okay, it is a relative pronoun, which is a complex sentence structure. Right. So most of the sentences used in here are complex sentence structure. But as I told you, in academic writing, we need to use wide range of sentence structure, simple, compound, complex, but probably with more focus on complex sentence structure. Let's look at this sentence here and see the academic writing written in it. So as you can see in here, the word prevalence is an adjective. I would color it as blue. Of gambling among university students has become a growing area of concern, with the studies indicating that young adults, again in here, young is adjective. However, the word particularly is an adverb. Okay, vulnerable. Okay, again in here, the word is an adjective. Okay, to developing problematic gambling behaviors. Now in here, problematic gambling behaviors. So again, the word problematic is an adjective. The word gambling is a noun. It's a gerund. Okay, to gamble is a verb. Gambling is a noun. And then, but in here, in this sentence, it's acting as an adjective. So problematic gambling behavior, it is an adjective. Now, as you can see in here, study, cross-sectional study, it's also an adjective. All right, conducted in Canada, and as you can see, found that 43% of male university students reported gambling within the past 6 months, often influenced by peer pressure. So all of these are adjectives. So as you can see in here, the student is using lots of adjectives when writing. Right, in here, looking at this text, all right, you would see, or if we look at this text as an essay, look at here in the first one, okay, this is the first paragraph, and this is the second paragraph, and then later on in here, this is the third paragraph, and we are going to analyze it also in a bit. Right. I wonder if you have any question, but we're going to move on. Please put the questions in the chat. Now, another aspect of academic writing, which is the use of hedging or caution, or as I mentioned earlier, it is that tentative language. Now, when dealing with complex ideas, there are few absolutes. There are usually alternative explanations which should be taken into account, into consideration. Now, let's look at this sentence. For instance, many people in the UK have linked floods in the UK to the threat of climate change. So linking the flood with the climate change. Now, let's say one student would like to talk about floods in the UK and the connection, associating it with climate change. So, for example, writing about this possible link, a student might make the following statement in their writing. Now, in here, look at this sentence. The recent flooding in the UK proves that climate change is a threat to this region. Now, in here, this sentence is presented as a fact, okay? Now, in here, we need to be careful. As you can see, cautious. We need to be cautious, okay? We need to be careful. And we need to use now hedging language, tentative language. So we are not 100% sure that the flooding is taking place because of the climate change, all right? It's still debatable. However, this sentence tells me or talks about the issue as a fact. Now, looking at this sentence, there is a problem with the statement. It presumes that there is a definite connection between the flooding in the UK and climate change. At present, most scientists agree that this claim cannot be made with 100% certainty. I'm not sure. Okay, so this sentence, therefore, needs to be expressed more cautiously. So I need, as a writer, I need to be more cautious. Okay, now, in here, for example, you see the word proves. It tells me like it is a fact. And you see the word is, verb to be is. Climate change is a threat to this region. So what I can do, I can be more cautious. How? By using certain techniques. So I can hedging verbs, or I can use hedging adverbs or adjectives. I can use the language of probability and modal verbs, or I can use hedging expressions. Let's see here in this example. Now, so looking at this, many style guides for students advise against using verbs like prove and is, verb to be is, as it demonstrates too much certainty. Now in here, I have written this in a red color. In a red color to show that we should not use this kind of language, okay? So in order to be more cautious, I can use hedging verbs like demonstrated. It has been demonstrated. Or I can say it has been suggested. Or I can say it has been suggested that climate change seems to be. So look at the verb. Demonstrate, suggest, seem, or we have the word also indicate. I should have colored this with a green color. The word indicate also is a hedging verb. In these actually cases, the meaning of the verb suggested, okay, this one, is more tentative than the word demonstrated. And as you can see in here, in this example, the word seems, it is more tentative than the second sentence, okay, because I used here is. So again in here, when I say it seems, okay, so for example, you remember with me like Donald Trump, and many people would say that this person is a controversial person. Why is that? Because he is making sentences that look like a fact. So for example, when he talked about Canada, you know, probably 2 years ago or last year, I think, when he talked about Canada, he said Canada must be the 51st state in the USA. So must be. So he's talking a kind of like of certainty. Now, again in here, this kind of language is not, you know, preferable in you know, the context of diplomacy. Anyway, so what we need to do, we can use hedging verb, okay? Or we can use adverbs and adjectives. Look at here with me at this adverb. It has been widely suggested. Or I can say, for example, it is fairly likely, it is possible that climate change. I can say it is highly probable. Okay, so look at here at these two sentences. It is likely that climate change is a threat, or it is highly probable that climate change is a threat to this region. So you can see the degrees of probability and the degrees of cautiousness. So in here, as previously, the level of caution varies as highly, the word highly, indicates greater certainty than the word fairly. Okay, so I would say that this sentence, it is fairly likely, it is more cautious than this sentence. But as you can see in here, in the red one, it's not cautious at all because of the word proves and is. Now, the language of probability, I can use modal verbs. Modal verbs like when we use the word can, or could, may, or might, okay? So all of these modal verbs can make the sentence more tentative. Look at here. Climate change could be a threat. And in here, as you can see, it has been widely suggested that climate change could be a threat to this region, as the recent flooding indicates. So I used in here hedging verbs, and I used in here the language of probability. I used in here an adverb, the word widely, and in here the language of probability, I used a modal verb. Also, we have the hedging expressions. Probably you can use to some extent, up to a point, in many respects, in one sense, more or less, etc. So in here, as you can see, in many respects, football should be regarded as a business rather than a sport, at least as far as the major clubs are concerned. So as you can see in here, the use of in many respects, we use this expression, and we use should, which is a modal verb. Okay, and the language of probability. Also, in the hedging language, we can use, different modal auxiliary verbs, as I already said, probability adjectives, probability adverbs, and also we can use frequency adverbs. So in academic writing, we should be tentative. Okay, so in this case, Donald Trump should have used a different language. Probably he could have said like Canada could be, okay, the 51st state in the UK. Now let's go for application and see whether the students used, used the hedging language. Now in here, as you can see, studies reveals the students used simple present tense, okay? A similar pattern with a notable prevalence of gambling among that often correlates. So you see in here, the word often correlates. The word often shows that, the frequency of the action. So often correlates. If I change this one and I use, for example, the word always, as you can see in here, it won't be like tentative language. Okay? So in here, the student used often, as I already mentioned. If I go back again, so you notice in here, the frequency adverbs I can use generally, usually, often, occasionally, and seldom. So this kind of language is tentative. So look at here at this sentence. Additionally, these students were more likely to report. So look at here, more likely. So the adverb likely in here, okay, or adjective, I would say, more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and depression. So as you can see in here, the use of the word may, okay. Now in here, these findings highlight the urgent need for interventions targeting gambling to mitigate its negative effects. Now in here, this is the recommendations. But as you can see in here, the student is using tentative language, like the word likely, and in here, in here we have may, that frequent gamblers, not all gamblers. So sometimes I have students writing like that gamblers showed a marked drop. Like if I delete this, that gamblers, this means that all gamblers. And again in here, this is, we call it a bold statement. Are you sure that all gamblers showed a marked drop in academic performance? No, in here, as you can see, the student is tentative by reporting this study in Nigerian universities that frequent gamblers. Okay, so as you can see, the student is using a tentative language. Okay, right. So let's move on. So we did like an application. I wish I can go in more details about this, but unfortunately, because of the time limit, I cannot go over all the text. Right, let's move on. Now in here, why we need to paraphrase. So we noticed that the student in here used a study, okay, that's been taking place in Nigerian universities. So a recent study, okay, by these people in Nigerian universities found that. So all of this statement has been paraphrased from a study. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to remove the highlight from here and from here. We finished with that, and to make it right. So looking at this actually is being taken from, as I said, from a study that took place in Nigerian universities in 2023. Now, the student paraphrased this statement from the study. Now, why we need to paraphrase? We paraphrase to understand the material, to show that you have understood what you have read. So, for example, I went to that study, I read that study, I understand what this study is about, and then later on, I want to report the findings of this study in my article. So I need to show that I understand the material. I need also to convey the idea that I found it in the source material. And as you know, in academic writing, plagiarism is not accepted nor tolerated. It's considered academic offense, illegal academic act. Now, how we paraphrase. So, for example, let's look at this text together. Now, as you can see in here, in that text, this text been written by a person called Bernie Siegel, 1986. Now, he was talking about the relationship, as you can see in here. We do not understand all the ways in which brain chemicals are related to emotions and thoughts. So the relationship between brain chemicals and emotions and thoughts. So, you know, the hormones in our body, okay, sometimes makes us angry, sometimes makes us like kind of like surprised, like when we have, for example, the adrenaline in our blood vessels. So this makes us more excited, interested to do something. Okay, so as you can see in here, we do not understand all the ways in which brain chemicals are related to emotions and thoughts, but the salient point is that our state of mind has an immediate and direct effect on our state of body. Now, in academic writing, we need now to paraphrase that original text into a text of our own words. So looking at this text, and looking at the paraphrased one. Look at this paraphrased one. So that is the original. The first one is the original. And the second one is the paraphrased one. I'm going to give you 1 minute, okay, to read both texts. And I want you to highlight the differences, okay, in that text. Because in this way, we know how to paraphrase texts, okay? And we write them academically. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Of course, the 1 minute is for you to read both texts. The first one is original. The second one is the paraphrased one.
You can drop your answers in the chat box if you feel
Right. I can see. I have a question from Fagade. I'm just reading this. Okay, so the question is, how can we know what words are appropriate for our audience? Again, in here, you are the one who is specialized, okay, in that content. So, for example, you know who your audience are. Are you talking to young learners, or are you talking to university students, or are you talking to experts? So in this case, you would be able to know what kind of vocabulary you are using. Now in here, for example, if it when we're talking about, let's say, some jargons, okay, jargons, it is a kind of like specialized terminologies used, okay, to talk about your topic. Now in here, you are the one who is able to determine whether, for example, as I said, you are talking to undergraduate students, or probably postgraduate students, or probably you are talking to your colleagues who they can understand what language you're using. Now, in all cases, you need to explain that language. You need to explain the terminologies you are using in your writing. Okay. Right. Anyway, in here, we have this text. As I said, the first one is the original. The second one is the paraphrased one. Now, looking at here, how to paraphrase, actually, we change words for synonyms. As you can see in here, the word emotions, change it to feelings. And the state of mind, we change it to psychological state. State of body, we change it to physical state. Now, again, in here, we change word formation. Now, we need to understand the nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs that are in the original text. And then later on, I change them into different forms. So as you can see in here, the word effect, it becomes affect, from noun to a verb. Related, from a verb to a noun. And then immediate to an adverb, from adjective to adverb, and then understand as a verb, and then understood as a verb in the past participle. So also change the sentence structure, which we already talked about. So in here, for example, in the original text, I found that there are simple sentences. Okay, so what I can do, I can change the simple sentences into compound sentences, or from compound sentences to complex sentences. In the example we had, as you can see in here, we started by saying, or the original text started by saying, we do not know A, but we know B. Although, we change it to although we know A, it is B. So back again to the text, as you can see in here, although the relationship between brain chemistry and thoughts is not fully understood, it is known that a human psychological state affects our physical state instantly. And a very important thing, which is citing the source. Now, in here, it is very important to cite the source to acknowledge where we got this piece of information. So in here, we have this text. As you can see in here, this is, we call it plagiarized text. Now, look at here. We do not understand all the ways. We still do not know all the ways in which brain chemistry is related to emotions, in which brain chemicals are related to emotions. This is a plagiarized text. And I put it in red to show that we must not do that. Okay, and again in here, this is a plagiarized text again, because look at here. In here, there is the citation. In the text in here before, we don't have citation. So in here, I would say it's a double crime. We don't have a citation. But in here, even though we have a citation, it is still considered a plagiarized text. Why is that? Now, it is because it is similar to the original text, and the vocabulary are still the same or changed very little, and no change for word forms, and no change of sentence structure. And in the first one, we noticed that there was no citation. But again in here, if I go back, this is considered plagiarized text because of what? Although we have a citation, but it is plagiarized text because of all these reasons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so when we write academically, we need to avoid using sentences from the original text, and we need to avoid using the same vocabulary, and we need to change the word formation, and also we need to show a different sentence structure. Okay, and we need to cite the sources, okay? Not to forget that. Now, as for the in-text citation, we have two kinds of in-text citation. We have information prominent citation and author prominent citation. Now, in academic writing, let's look at here. This is, we call it information prominent citation. Why is that? Because I put the information at the beginning, and then later on in here, as you can see, I have the citation at the end. So we call it information prominent. It means that the information is important, okay? The information is clear. They are at the beginning of my sentence. However, sometimes we have what we call author prominent citation. So author in here is important. So I put it at the beginning, and then later on I put the information. Now, my question is, should we use author prominent citation or information prominent citation? The answer to this, we should vary. We should use both of them, okay? Again, in here, this depends on you. What do you want to show? For example, if you got information from World Health Organization. So in this case, you would say, according to World Health Organization, it has been found that, and then you continue and say the information. So you put WHO at the beginning. Why? Because you want to show the focus is on the focus of this information. I got it from WHO. All right. However, if you are interested of talking about information at the beginning, so you say, for example, it has been found that around 57 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus in the UK, according to the WHO. Again, in here, this is just an example. I'm just making this up. Okay. So you put the information at the beginning, and then you say, according to the WHO. Okay. World Health Organization. So it's totally okay, up to you, whether you want to put the information at the beginning or you want to put the author at the beginning. All right. Now, what happens if I am quoting, if I am using the same exact words? In academic writing, you can do that, but actually you should not exceed, I would say, 20% of, the similarity of copying, of quoting. Usually in the UK university, not usually, I think all of the UK university, they give students, 20%, or I would say 19% of similarity, or the use of quotation. So you can copy the same exact word. Now, when you do that, academically speaking, you need to put the page number where you got this information from. So as you can see in here, this is the original text, and this is the quoted text. I'm using the same exact words. So as you can see in here, they are the same. We do not understand all the ways in which you bring chemicals. We do not understand all the ways in which you bring chemicals. So what I need to do, I need to put page number and the quotation marks. So in here, quotation marks, this tells me that it is a quotations. Now, let's do a kind of a practice or application of our knowledge. Let's look at here. I'm going to delete that. Okay, remove the highlight. So let's look at here. Looking at this sentence, globally, da, 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 da. All right, and then later on in here, okay, we don't have here citation. Okay, anyway, in a cross-sectional study conducted in Canada, as you can see in here, the student is using what? The student in here is using, as I said, I'm going to make a different color. As I said, the student is using, as you can see, author prominent citation. So author prominent, we have Trant et al. When we say Trant et al, it means Trant and other writers, okay, and other, authors who contributed in this study. So when we say et al, it means and the rest. Okay, Tran and the other authors. Okay, what did they find? They found that 43. So this is, we call it author prominent citation. Let's look at here. Similarly, in Australia, it was observed a significant proportion of male undergraduate and as you can see in here, this is information prominent citation, and I'm going to put it in purple color, or no, I'm going to put it in green color, just to make it different. Okay, so as you can see, the first one is author prominent citation, while the second one, it's information prominent citation. I put the information at the beginning, and in here I put it at the end. Now, as you can see in here, I'm not sure about in here this study, because the student is saying like Tran et al. All right, 2024. All right. Again, in here, I don't know if the same writers are doing it in Australia, both contexts in Australia, and I'm not sure if it is the same study. If it is the same study, the student should have written. Anyway, let's look at here in African context. All right, for instance, a study conducted by Rayleigh, etc. So I'm going to color this in blue because it is author prominent citation. In South Africa, again in here, it is author prominent citation. Now, these findings underscore how in African all of this, I will put it in a green color because it is information prominent citation. Okay, is that clear? So you notice in here, in this particular section, the student is using sometimes author prominent and sometimes information prominent citation. And as I told you, we need to vary between the two. So for example, in here, in Nigeria, what kind of study? All right, in Nigeria, there are several pattern in here. A recent study conducted by these people found, and again in here, the study indicated, etc. So as you can see in here, I put it in blue color. All right. Additionally, now you see in here the word additionally, we're going to talk about it in a bit. So in here, it gives me more information. So in here, another study. So these findings highlight the urgent need. All right, okay. These findings highlight the urgent need for interventions targeting Nigeria, etc. So as you can see, I'm going to color this in green color because it is information prominent citation. Okay. So you see in here, the student is really doing a good job academically by writing in varied ways, information and sometimes author prominent citations. Right. Let's move on and discuss the paragraph structure. Now, as you notice, we are moving from, features from the sentences structure to, now more paragraph structure. Paragraph structure generally consists of the following key components. We need to have a topic sentence, supporting sentences, and then transition words, concluding sentences, and sometimes it has the format of peel, meaning that you have a point, and then you need to provide an example evidence, and then you need to explain and link. Sometimes we change the way we do it. So basically, a paragraph, when we write academically, we need to be organized. So in a paragraph, you need to have an idea. You need to have a point, a main point, okay, that you are going to discuss in this paragraph. Okay, now you have the point, and then you need to explain the point. All right, you need to make it simple, okay, for the reader to understand what you mean by that. And then later on, you need to provide examples. You remember at the beginning, you said that it is evidence-based. Evidence-based, so I need to provide examples, I need to provide studies, I need to provide statistics. And also with the transition words, that tells me I'm moving from one example to another example. Or probably I'm arguing one idea with another idea. Okay, and then later on, sometimes some writers, they write a concluding sentences, and sometimes They don't. They just link one paragraph with another paragraph. Now let's look at this paragraph together. Now, this is a basic paragraph. Now, I will tell you that we teachers, when we look at the paragraph, we look at it from a different perspective. Okay? When I look at the paragraph, I see it differently. And hopefully today, in this session, okay, you will have that ability as well. So, for example, in here, corporate social responsibility can generate Watson provides, for example, and then later on in here, as you can see, overall. Now, when I look at this, I find it in a different way. Look, I find it in this way. Unfortunately, if I don't find it in this way, then there is a problem in the paragraph. Then there is a problem in the writing that you have done. Then this means that you are making my job as a reader very difficult to understand what you're trying to say. So, for example, in here, in this basic paragraph, I can see that there is a kind of like a main idea. What is corporate social responsibility? It can generate a positive reputation for a company, leading to possibly more sales and growth. So, in here, the writer claims that having CSR, we can have positive reputation for the company, okay? And this can lead to more sales and growth. Now, in here, I don't believe that. So, as you can see in here, there is evidence. According to Jones et al. 2019, and Watson provides evidence that this. So the green color is the evidence. Now, one might ask me, how about explanation? Yes, you can add explanation. However, here in this paragraph, okay, there is no explanation. However, there is evidence. So in here, I can see that this is the main point. All right, this is the main idea of the paragraph. And then later on in here, I have evidence. And in here, I have example. And then later on in here, I know that the writer is using a concluding statement, a concluding sentence. So in this way, I understand what the writer is trying to say. Now, looking at this, the first one is a point. The green one, or the blue one, is a point, is the main point. The green one, the green part, as you can see in here, is an evidence. The yellow part is example. And then finally in here, as you can see, the concluding statement. Right. Now, one might say, what happens if I provide a point, an idea, but I don't provide evidence? Then this means that your paragraph is weak. Okay? And again in here, you are not being academic. Why? Because you lack the evidence-based feature in academic writing. So, what happens if I have explanation, I have evidence, I provided examples? This means that you are abiding with, academic writing features. So now, in here, this is totally up to you, okay? Whether you want to make your writing academic or not. Now, as I said already, in academic writing, we have what we call linking words, signposting, transition words. You remember, we mentioned that earlier in the first hour. So for me, as a teacher, I'm looking at these. Look at here. I see these words. Sorry, these words, like according to, I should have put here, I should have highlighted this. According to Jones, okay, this is a kind of a linking word. And then later on in here, I have the word thus. I have in here the word for example. I have in here as a result. So I know that there is a cause and effect. And then later on here, I can see that there is the word overall. So I know that now the student or the writer is trying to conclude the paragraph. Okay, now let's move on and do some application. All right, now I'm moving now back again to this text. You see that text? Right, I'm going to conclude that, and I'm going to remove this now for the time being. Now, let's look at the text. Now, as I told you, we're going to see the text from a different perspective. Right, now prevalence, the student here is talking about the prevalence of gambling and academic performance among male undergraduates. Now, you remember with me, we talked about the paragraph. We have point, explanation, example, evidence, and then later on we have linking words or sometimes concluding sentence. Let's see in here. The students in here, in this one, globally, the prevalence of gambling among university students, etc. So I know that the student now is talking about something globally. All right? So in here, this is the main point. Now, later on, the student is trying to provide an example. All right? Or evidence. Look, in a cross-sectional study conducted in Canada, all of this is happening and taking place in Canada. Look at here. He's moving and he's talking about the issue globally. All right? Globally. So he's talking about Canada. Now in here, I'm going to make it with a different color. All right? You remember with me, we used the green color.
Green color.
Yeah. Right. And then, look at here. Similarly, in Australia, so the student is talking about Canada. All right. I'm putting in here Canada. And then later on, the student is talking about Australia. So similarly, in Australia, etc. So in here, the student is talking about Australia. So I'm going to put it in green color as well. No, not this one, this one. And then later on, studies in Europe and Asia. So in here, I would make it orange, because here talking about Canada, Australia. And then later on in here, the student is talking about studies in Europe and Asia have shown, etc. So in here, I'll put it now again a green color. But look at here, he's talking about in Europe and Asia. So I'm going to put that in context. So as you can see in here, the main idea is talking about globally. All right? And then showing examples from Canada, and then Australia, and then the Europe and Asia. Now, then later on, look at here. The student is moving from globally to what? Look, in African context. So now in here, in this sentence, the student is narrowing down the scope from globally to African context. Sorry.
Jeremy.
So in here, in African contexts. Now, let's look together. For instance, so the student in here is using, for instance, a study conducted, etc., etc., etc. And as you can see in here, this is also an evidence and an example. An example, an evidence and an example. All right. Now, let's look at here. For instance, where this happened, it happened in Ghana. Now, let's look at here. In South Africa, okay, Moyo, etc., reported that, etc. So, again in here, this is another evidence. Well done. But now, in here, this is taking place in South Africa. And then later on, these findings underscore how, So what does that mean? These findings underscore. I will put it, all right, in a red color. It's a kind of a concluding statement, concluding the findings in African regions. What African regions? They talked about South Africa and Ghana, and then later on in here, providing an evidence base from a study in 2020. Now, let's move on. The student started from globally, then African context in Ghana and South Africa, then narrow it down to where? Look, in Nigeria. So you can see the link from globally to African contexts, then to Nigerian context. Why the student is talking about Nigerian context? Of course, look at here. You remember, back again, in this place. And I believe this place must be in Nigeria. Okay, so in here, they are trying to show us the studies that took place in Nigeria. Now, in Nigeria, and again in here, this is the main sentence, and I'll put it in, you remember, we used blue. Now, a recent study conducted by Nigerian universities found the study indicated all of this, I'll put it in a green color. As you can see here with me, now we are looking at the text from a different perspective. Now, you with me, we see now how we should treat the paragraph, how, we should, write a paragraph. Now, as you can see in here, now we're talking about Nigerian universities, so it is really lovely. And then additionally, these students were more likely to report the anxiety, etc., etc. So still, no, we're still here in the same evidence. Now in here, these findings highlight urgent need for interventions, etc., etc. And this is another information just to support. And I will put it in here in yellow color. Okay, or I can use it as also as a concluding sentence because they was talking about these findings. So I can put it with red color, a concluding sentence. Now, looking at this, again, I'm going to excuse you to make them black again. As I told you, as teachers, when we look at text, we look at it from a different perspective. So in here, I know globally. The student is using globally, all right? And then later on in here, when I start reading, okay, when I start reading this, I can see, for example, in here, the word similarly. So you see the transition word, similarly. I'm talking here about the context in Canada, but then later on, I say similarly, okay? Similarly in a different context. So I have here Canada, okay? Canada, which is the context, okay? And then later on in here, I have Australia. So I know they are similar, okay? Now, in here, if I go ahead, again, I know that we are talking about this context. So I'll put it like this. And then I know that the student is giving me an example, as you can see in here. And then as you can see, the word due to. So again, cause and effect. I know that also the student is using in here such as, so it's trying to give me an example. I know the student is also in here using not only, so I know it's not only one thing, but also another thing. So it's talking about two ideas, not only by recreational interest, but also, you see here, I know that he is talking about not only one thing, but the other thing. And then later on in here, if you see with me, we can see that the student is saying, when reading it, we see that the student is using the word additionally. Okay, so in here, I know that he's adding another idea, okay, to what he already said in here. Okay, this is one idea, and then later on in here, I have another idea. Okay, all right, and when the student is using these findings, so he's referring back to something. So as you can see in here, there is these findings as well. All right. Now, in here, we looked together at how we can, examine texts, how we can, build a paragraph. So now back again, looking at all of this, we can understand that in this essay, I would say, very micro essay about the prevalence of gambling, okay, among male undergraduates. This talked about the issue globally and then moved to African context and then later on moved to Nigerian context. Why? Because the research questions, the research title is about this topic, okay, is about the Nigerian undergraduate students. Right. Now, today, what did we do? Today, we looked at academic writing. We tried to find what makes academic writing academic. We looked at the structure, and we said that we have essay structure and we have also the research structure. Essay structure, we have introduction, body, and conclusion. In the body, as you can see in here, we have these ideas. So in here we have main idea. It talks about globally, and then later on in here in this paragraph it talks about African context. In this paragraph it talks about Nigerian context. Then later on we talked about a kind of like do's and don'ts in academic writing. Avoid using slang and use more formal language. Use more objective language rather than subjective. Use passive voice. Okay, and try to use academic vocabulary, not everyday spoken one. We also talked about hedging. We try to be, tentative and cautious, not to make assertive and bold statements, rather than be more cautious and tentative. How? By using certain techniques, by using hedging verbs like suggest, appear, seems to be, indicates, and also we use adverbs or adjectives like possible, probable, widely, highly, fairly, likely, and also we use the language of probability using modal verbs like may, should, could, might. Again, in here we have different degrees of certainties, and we can use adverbs of frequency like often, usually, rarely, scarcely, etc. And we talked about the use of expressions, hedging expressions, when we say to some extent, in many respects, etc. And we also learned about paraphrasing in academic writing. We use different techniques, and we need to use all these techniques together in order to avoid plagiarism, which is academic misconduct. So in this case, we need to change words for synonyms or probably sometimes antonyms. We change also the word formation from adjectives to nouns, to adverbs, etc. We also use the change of sentences structure from simple, compound, complex, or a mix of both. We also learn the importance of citing the source, and in academic writing we have two ways of citing the source, either author prominent citation or information prominent citation, and we need to use various ways, like we need to use both of them. And then we talked about the paragraph structure, and we said in any paragraph we need to have a main idea, and then later on we have example, explanation, evidence, and then concluding statement or a statement that link it with another paragraph. Then we talked about the linking words, and these linking words are very important in showing criticality in sentences. I apologize if I didn't talk about criticality, being critical, but in order to be critical, then in this case we can use words like, as I said earlier, using yet, however, on the other hand, on the contrary. So in here, you're showing you're showing one idea, and you're showing a contrasting idea, or probably a counter argument for what you are discussing. That is all, everyone. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for attending today. I again would like to say my thanks to Olya Messi and all the organizers for this event. It has been a pleasure and an honor being with you in these 2 hours. I hope I was successful in talking about and sharing the knowledge together about academic writing and what means to write academically. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zaki. That's been very interesting.
Thank you.
You learn every day. I'm busy jotting down here because I've learned so much. Thank you so much. God bless you. And quickly, before we just go into, we just have very few minutes for questions, but I just want to quickly ask about using critical language, because it's a very major issue, one of the huge gaps that we notice in the undergraduate research challenge. So if you can just quickly, talk about this so that they understand what it means to critique, especially when you begin to use evidences. Because we've seen in that write-up that you use that continuously the student was citing evidences and examples from the global level to the regional level and down to the national level. But the element of criticality, I think that is where we had a lot of problems.
Right. Okay. I wonder if I can, just a moment. Right. I'm trying here to find quickly. Right. Okay. So I'm going to quickly show in here. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Olya Messi. Right. I'm sharing my screen again, entire screen here, share. Yeah, I wonder if you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Right. So looking at this text, okay, statement of problem. So the proliferation of electronic gambling has become, etc. So I know that this is the beginning, or this is the main topic. So in here, the writer is trying to show the concern of electronic gambling, okay? So proliferation of electronic gambling has become a significant concern in contemporary society, particularly among young adults and university students. Now, this phenomenon is characterized by increasing accessibility, etc., etc., etc. So all of this, I would say this is the main idea. Now, let's look at here. We have the word while, as I told you. Now in here, the word while, it's the beginning of a complex sentence structure, and also it shows a kind of criticality. Now, let's see whether the student in here, in this particular paragraph, managed to show us an aspect of criticality, or show a strand of criticality. Now, while electronic gambling offers a convenient and engaging form of entertainment. So let's look at here. That is the beginning of the sentence, and I will put it in a green color. So now we know that gambling is something positive. How? Because it offers a convenient and engaging form of entertainment. So it tells me that gambling is entertaining, okay? Now in here, it also poses potential risks. So now in here, I know that we have something negative. So the writer is trying to be critical. How? By starting the sentence using while, and then he's telling me that gambling is fun, is entertaining, but then later on, the writer is telling me that gambling poses potential risks. So you see in here, this is part of criticality. Now, then later on, the student is showing academic performance is a critical aspect of student life, influencing their future career, etc. Now, again in here, the student is using, a sentence to tell me about the significance of academic performance. Now, then later on, the student is using however. So I know that the student is being, again, critical. Look at here. Engagement in in electronic gaming can detract from academic responsibilities, leading to poor da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so all of this, again in here, showing me negative effects, okay, because of gambling. Now, in here, look at the word previous studies has indicated, and then later on in here, all of this tells me that this is an evidence. And then as you can see in here, for instance, again, an evidence by a study. So I will put it in a green color. Okay, this is evidence. Now I'm highlighting this in red to show criticality, just to show criticality. Now, this suggests, now again in here, this is an explanation that electronic gambling may similarly impact students' academic success, necessitating a closer examination, etc. Now, again in here, you would notice that it's talking about the effects. Now, gambling addiction has been linked to various mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, stress. So again in here, the student is talking about the negativity. Now, these mental health challenges can further exacerbate academic difficulties, etc. And then later on, the student is showing here an example or an evidence. Look, an evidence to what? To academic difficulties. Now, all of these are evidence and examples. Now, back again. Was the student critical enough? Now, in my view, the student was critical, but not critical enough. Now, if I were in the student's, position, I probably would talk about gambling, okay, from other perspective. In order to be critical, you noticed here with me that the student is talking about that gambling is good, a kind of good, okay? Why? Look at here. Because of, let me change this. Because of what? Entertainment. Now, as I told you, if I want to be more critical, I would talk about gambling as, you are playing games. Now, does playing games something positive? Well, yes. In terms of what? In terms of cognitive, increasing cognitive skills. Okay? You are motivating more cognitive skills. So when you are doing any game, all right, you are improving and you you enhance your cognitive skills. So in this case, probably I would talk about gambling as a way of entertaining and a way of enhancing cognitive skills, and also probably, sometimes a high self-esteem, building high self-esteem, okay, that shows that you are doing something in a good way, all right, and probably at the end of gambling, sometimes people win, all right. So in this case, probably you talk about this particular side, okay, of the perspective of winning. Okay, what does that do to self-perception? How people view themselves when they win, when they gamble. Now, in here, as you can see here, I'm not trying to encourage gambling, no, at all. But I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Now, for example, does it entertain? Yeah, it is entertaining. But at the same time, does it enhance cognitive skills? Yes, it involves, because it is a kind or a way of playing games, and it enhances cognitive skills. Number three, about like self-perceptions, how people view themselves when they win. Okay, again, in here, I can talk about this positive perspective. Now, in here, the student, I would say that they looked at gambling from the point of view of being entertaining. Probably, I would say I would look at it from a different perspective, from building cognitive skills, as well as probably, increasing self perception. Right. In this way, I can be critical, and then later on, I can focus on the negative aspects of gambling. How? I can talk about the level of engagement in, academic performance. I can talk about how gambling can cause anxiety, depression, and stress. Okay, and sometimes probably destroy self-perception. Okay, well, not sometimes. In most of the cases, people lose. Okay, you know what happens when they, gamble and lose. Right. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zaki. Thank you. That answers the question.
Perfect.
So, our time is fast spent, but there is one big question
Yes.
we need to tie to all this. And somebody has asked that question. It says, what's your take on the use of AI, generative, to generate, to
Yeah.
paraphrase, and to give us a flow or something? The use
Right.
of AI in all this.
Yeah. Well, when I think about AI, we need to use it, with cautiousness and being careful. Now, it is pretty much similar, okay, when we use the calculator. At the beginning, using calculator, I would say that my father frowned upon me, when I using the calculator when I was, in the primary school. But then later on, calculator and using the computer was like an integrated part of, our daily use. Now, talking about academic writing, and the use of AI, this tool is in front of us and we can use it in a positive way, in a good way. So, for example, probably by proofreading, sometimes I can use it like as a way to proofread my work, okay, by, for example, using, the correct grammar, accurate grammar, and using the punctuation. Also, in the use of academic writing, I would say that I use it to generate ideas. I use it as a starting point. But then later on, okay, there is the human touch. I think that is irreplaceable. Okay, so we use it as a way to help us generate ideas, as a way to kickstart our writing, but we should not use it, in a way that we copy what AI says. So, for example, I will tell you this very, quickly. I used AI. I asked AI question to generate an essay for me. And then AI generated that essay, and I asked it like to provide with references. So it provided references. Now, for me, I went to these references and I checked them one by one. And I noticed that the last reference used by AI was made up. I went to the journal, I went to the volume, I went to the issue, and then I couldn't find the article generated by AI. So I asked AI, was this generated? And AI admitted. And he said, yes, sorry, it was a made up reference. And then AI asked me to generate another essay with reliable sources. And again, it made the same mistake. And I asked AI, have you used a fictitious or a fake reference again? And AI told me, yes, I used it, I used a fake reference again. And, and not only this, it apologized to me. And then later on, it thanked me for being so diligent. So you see here, the use of AI is a double-edged, I would say, sword. You can use it, but to help you to generate ideas, to proofread your work, but you should not copy the statement it says, because the information up to this moment of speaking may not be reliable. You see here, I'm saying may not be reliable. Okay?
Thank you very much, Zaki.
You're welcome.
That answers the question. And for many of us, I know it's just, you just want to have that thing that, let this thing just paraphrase for me. I've done the work myself, but just make the paraphrasing very fast and all that. But your originality is very important.
Yeah, but when paraphrasing, unfortunately, sometimes, it moves away from the meaning. And sometimes when it paraphrases the text, it uses the same vocabulary, or just changing the vocabulary. And this is not enough in paraphrasing. You can use it to show you an example of a paraphrased text. But again, later on, you need to understand the material, to change the synonyms, to change word formation, change sentence structure, and cite your source appropriately.
Thank you very much. Many schools now are using AI detector that'll show you the percentage AI use. So if it's over 20%, definitely your lecturer is going to flag it, okay?
Yes.
So be cautious with the use of AI. And for most of the other questions, we're going to send them to Zaki. The ones that are related directly to this class, he's going to answer some of them, and we'll post them into the groups because of the time. But you can all agree that this time is really worth it, and we've learned a lot. For this class, we can actually go on and on. It's just because of time constraint, because there are different angles to it. And you could see the example that he was using is actually a work submitted by one of you, and the person won the 2025 undergraduate research challenge, and the person won 2 million naira. So, but the class started from here. So for those of you that think that this may be a joke, this thing can be a gateway to open you to greater doors, okay? So you need to pay more attention. And some of these people are also in the group with you. They are there as the research assistant to help you navigate through. So for those of you in 500 level, please pay very good attention, because the undergraduate research challenge, the entry is just 4 months away. So you have a lot to do, to work on, okay? And every angle we are going to look at. And sometimes we send the work to Zaki to look at also, to look at the academic English aspect of the work. So it's up to you. Thank you, everyone. Zaki, we want to say
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I wish you a lovely evening.
Students.
Okay, I'll see you again. Okay, wish you all the best in your academic endeavors. And thank you, all your missing. Have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Marigat.